Welcome to Capital Insight. I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, and I'm your host on this program, which is designed to give our audience a little more insight into the personalities and politics of state government here in Salem, our state capital. Our guest today is a gentleman who has served in the legislature, has been a candidate for statewide elective office in the past, and last year successfully campaigned for the Attorney General position in the state of Oregon. Our new Attorney General, just sworn in, Ted Kulongoski.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
It's kind of difficult out this morning with all the snow here in Salem, but I'm very, very glad to be here.
Well, in a way, you've had to slog your way through political storms in Salem, and this time you get to slog your way through a real snowstorm.
Well, I think this is a test. I was sworn in last Thursday, and it was a snowstorm, and we have another storm today, and so I think if I can get through this winter, I'm going to do very well here.
Well, here you are, Ted Kulongoski, a Democrat, just elected Attorney General to a 4-year term in a contested race with a Republican opponent, and you're about to start off on this dynamic term of office. Have you got some plans that are ahead that you're thinking about for the Attorney General's office? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I went to an Attorney General school down in Arizona around the 1st of December. And after listening to all the other Attorney Generals around the country who had just recently been elected, I concluded 3 things. One, that we must be all fairly good politicians because we all won. Secondly, we do want to leave our mark on the office that we have achieved. And the third is that none of us really knew much about what we were doing in the position, because the truth of it is that even though candidates talk as if in fact that they know a great deal about the office, you really don't know until you've been there. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have ideas of what we want to do, but there's a real reality that takes place the day that you sit behind the desk and that you are a statewide elected official. The fact is that until someone becomes the Attorney General, there's no other experience that I think that adequately is a corollary to being the Attorney General and our being the State Treasurer, or the Secretary of State, or the Governor, or any of these other offices. I think what we all do, though, is that we look out, and the reason why most of us all are in the positions we are, we believe very strongly in public service. We believe in the governance process, and I think that most of us think that government is a very honorable profession. And I think that what most of us hope to do is to leave a mark in which the people of this state say that that person was fair and that individual represented all the people of the state. Obviously, with the Attorney General's office, it covers such a wide variety of different type issues that if you asked me just to name 3 issues that I would tell you that I would like to become very, very much involved in. One is the issue of children and families, and the mission of the Attorney General's office in the area of child support. I think that we have to become much more aggressive than we have been. I think that we have done a fairly good job up to this point, but the fact is that 30% of the money that is due children and the custodial parent is never received by them in the area of child support.
Now, I will be asking a little more about child support as we delve into that, but first I'd like to hear what are the 2 other high points that you want to raise.
The other 2 have to do, one, with civil rights. I believe that a legitimate role of government is to change public attitudes. I think this is a difficult time for the people of Oregon because of this shifting economic base from a natural resource-based economy to a more service sector, technology, information-based economy. I think that it's a time that because of ballot measure 5, a variety of issues that basically make people insecure about their future. And I think that government must actually take a leadership role in the area of protecting the rights of all the citizens of this state.
And what's your third issue that you're
The third issue is the issue of environmental protection and environmental prosecution. Those are the 3 large areas that I wish that I could spend most of my time involving myself in. But there's one issue that is going to override all of those 3. And it's really the issue that you'll probably see the Attorney General becoming more and more involved in it, and that is becoming the principal spokesperson for the criminal justice system and the issue of public safety. I am absolutely convinced that the citizens of this state are starting to question whether, in fact, that the civil government can protect them in their homes and in their communities. And I think that we have an obligation at the state level to give a message back to the people that public safety is a #1 priority. It is a tough issue. There are tough choices to be made when you're dealing with the issue of crime, in the sense that you can put all of the resources into the adult system. I think that's the wrong decision. I think that for every dollar that goes into this criminal justice system, 99 cents should go into the front end with children and juveniles.
Now I'm going to interrupt you again now, because we're getting into it.
That's the 4th interruption.
Well, it's my job to interrupt you, to keep us on track here, and say that, let's take a step back for a moment. Your last elected predecessor, Dave Frohnmeyer, went out of his way to constantly disclaim the role of Attorney General as top cop, as he would say. And your predecessor for 1 year, Judge Charles Crookham, took a low-profile role. He was an appointee to fill out the last year of Frohnmeyer's term. And so you've come in now, and you're emphasizing as a theme the Attorney General as the spokesperson for the criminal justice system, a theme which I can adjust to very quickly. But for the sake of our audience, maybe we should define the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice in the state, and what your role is in the civil function. Because some people will wonder, what does the Attorney General do? And can you give us a quick idea about that, and then we should talk about this mission on criminal justice.
Well, in the broadest sense, that the Attorney General is the legal counsel for the state of Oregon. It is in the broadest sense, is the attorney for the people of the state, because they are its government. We provide the legal advice and the legal services to all of state government. We provide legal advice when requested by local governmental officials. Basically, it's a day-to-day operation as a law firm. I think it's probably easier to see it that way. The clients is the state of Oregon and the people of Oregon. The individual agencies within the state government may have a particular question, whether it's the DEQ or whether it's the Transportation Department, and the Attorney General's office provides legal advice and services to those agencies. The broadest view of the services that the Attorney General provides, other than advice, is it's basically in a reactive mode. As an example, all the criminal appeals that come into the Attorney General's office or into the appellate court system are represented generally by the Attorney General's office. 98% of all those cases were the respondent. All the post-conviction, the habeas corpus, all those issues were the respondent. In civil litigation, it's basically, again, 90+%. The state is the defendant. The state of Oregon's Attorney General's office provides a trial section that basically provides litigation services to the different state agencies when there's a lawsuit filed.
So it sounds like you have three roles that we're talking about. First, you give legal advice to the state agencies. Secondly, you represent them as their lawyers in litigation. And you were mentioning most of the time it's people suing the state, and then you have to defend the state. And third, you have this role in terms of the criminal justice system handling the appeals, and then also these post-conviction relief habeas corpus cases where someone's trying to get out of jail, in effect, and they bring a lawsuit to do that. Now, in the criminal justice side, I should mention we've got the Attorney General's office, but we have the district attorneys. Now, they're the prosecutors, the frontline prosecutors for crimes. And you were alluding to this, when someone's convicted and then they want to appeal, the responsibility shifts over to the Attorney General's office.
Yes.
And then you represent the state in defending against the appeal by the person who's been convicted.
That's right.
And your job is to try to maintain that conviction.
We try to keep them in jail. If they've been convicted and sentenced to jail, to be very blunt, that's what the function of the Attorney General's office is.
But now you're talking, too, about sort of a more assertive role in terms of talking about crime and corrections, the whole criminal justice system. Go ahead and expound a little bit on that.
One of the problems is that, and I think that Measure 5 has contributed to the analysis that I'm going to describe in a moment, but I think probably more than anything else is a general view that the criminal justice system is failing the citizens of this state and the citizens of this country. And by that I mean what we seem to be embarked upon is a program to spend millions of dollars to build more institutions, and we spend millions and millions more to maintain them after they're built and there are people in them. We have one of the, if not the highest incarceration rate of any industrialized nation in the world. And we have to look, I think, at a much broader view of the criminal justice system, and where we traditionally view it, let's just say in the broadest sense, as the police as one element, the prosecutors, the courts, and the corrections department as separate functions in this process. I think now we all understand that we have to see this in a much broader view, and we have to see how all of these different elements relate to each other. One of the issues, or one of the programs that I think is not generally viewed as part of the criminal justice system, which I am more interested in placing emphasis on, is the issue of prevention in dealing with children. I am convinced that if we're going to do anything to control the adult criminal population, you have to stop young people from moving from juvenile crime into adult crime. I think you manage the adult criminal problem, we can solve the juvenile justice problem. And I think we have to look much more closely at what we're doing with children. One of the ideas that I strongly believe in is that, as an example, that if you take the sentencing guidelines and you take the top three matrix in the vertical column in 9, 10, and 11 and dealing with the major serious offenses of murder, rape, arson, armed robbery, I think that 15 and over should be remanded to the adult court. I cannot understand why we debate that we lower the age of majority from 21 to 18. We have a law in Oregon that allows 16-year-olds to be emancipated by petitioning the court. I listened to a debate where, in fact, people now think that 16-year-olds should have the right to vote. But yet, when we talk about serious criminal activity, that someone says, well, at 15 or 16, they're still children. I disagree with that. And I think there are tough choices to be made, and I think that that's what we're going to be talking about. And the Attorney General, I think, is in the critical role of having the broadest view of any of these different parts of the criminal justice system and talking about it in its totality.
All right, well, let me mention to our audience that you're hearing from Ted Kulongoski, our new Attorney General. You're with us on Capital Insight. I'm your host, State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem. And we'll pick right back up with, Ted, your comments about the criminal justice system. It sounds like you want to focus on a preventative mode with younger kids that can be helped, and taking a tougher role with people that are no longer kids. 16-year-olds who commit murder are not kids anymore, and saying, look, we're going to shift those folks into the adult justice system, do what we can in that system. But in terms of preventative intervention and trying to counsel and work, you want to work with the younger kids.
I think if I get down, and push it down to the lowest level, we have a system of juvenile justice in this country that has been in place for almost 100 years, before the turn of the last century. And it was based upon a reformation mode, in that we developed the courts to actually sit as if they were the parent of the child. That in fact that they would look out for the best interest of the child. And we have two components in the juvenile justice system. We have what we call dependency cases, in which there is not criminal activity, but it's the issue of whether children are abandoned or abused or neglected. And I think that the reformation system that we currently have is probably adequate to deal with those people. They need more resources. But the area that I want to talk about is the other component of the juvenile justice system, and that's the delinquency side of it. And what my belief is that I think that if I define the system of juvenile justice, what I think that the two primary principles that have to be in it are, one, that individuals are responsible for their own actions. That if you do something, you're responsible for it. And second, there's a consequence for violating the rules. I'm not telling you that you have to be mean, but you have to have some consequence so people, young people, understand there is a penalty for violating the rules. Now let me suggest this summer, working in the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office as a Deputy District Attorney, I sat through a trial, and there's a third component that I've become more and more interested in, and it was a trial that I sat through with two young individuals, 18 years of age, from North Portland. They were charged with, in essence, an armed robbery. And what I could not get over is that though there was a jury trial, and they both had lawyers and were very ably represented, the trial didn't mean anything to them. I mean, they showed up in trial in cutoffs, tank tops. When there was witnesses giving testimony, they were talking to each other. And even after they were convicted and in the sentencing process, they really didn't appreciate what this process was all about. And what I've concluded is that for any system of consequences to have any effect, young people must be able to think long term. If you think that your future is just tomorrow, a judge telling you you can be locked up for 5 years means nothing to you. You don't think that long. And what I think we have to do is to get young people back into the position where they can dream and plan for their futures. And you have to give them the ability to think long term. And now that gets into all the social issues of how you help young people, whether it's in fact of education or health care or any of these other things. But I believe the state in the long run will be better served if they devote their resources in the criminal justice system to young people. I'm talking of 6, 7, and 8-year-old children.
So let me ask you, your agency represents, for instance, the Children's Services Division. Are you going to be appearing in front of legislative committees and working with them to try to enhance their opportunity to intervene positively on behalf of kids and to do things?
I've already met with the director of the Department of Human Resources, Kevin Concanon, and some of his staff, and I am interested in, and I've told him that I want to work to try to bring the Attorney General's office into more of a hands-on working relationship with some of the issues involved in the Children's Services and the Adult and Family Service divisions. I also, Kevin has come back and has now asked me to serve on a committee, and I'm going to do that because I actually, for any issue, Kevin, I think that the future of this state, and we've talked about it so much, and you and I have been in this process long enough to know that we all think that there's political mileage to be gained with children, but I think now it's the time to put the money where our mouths are, because if we're ever going to resolve the problems of this state and of this country, it's going to be with the young people and our commitment to them.
Picking up on that, discussing commitment to young people is Ted Kulongoski, who is our newly elected Attorney General, formerly a legislator and also a state agency head. In fact, we haven't even talked about Ted's history in government politics. Maybe we'll get to that, maybe we won't. But you're with us on Capitol Insight, and I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, your host. And I want to shift back to the child issue, because that sort of brings up the issue of child support. You have the Support Enforcement Division in the Department of Justice, and it's basically your job, working with some of the district attorney's offices, but mainly your job to go after these deadbeat dads, and occasionally deadbeat moms, but usually deadbeat dads who haven't been paying their child support. You mentioned earlier that you wanted to emphasize that role and be pushing in that area. What are some of your ideas on that?
Well, first of all, what the Attorney General's office, with its support enforcement, what we do is that we collect and obtain, we obtain and enforce child support orders for people who are drawing public assistance. That's called the public side. There's a whole different area of child support, which is what we call the private side, in which the parties are not receiving public assistance. Those issues are resolved either by private attorneys or by local district attorneys. We have the public side. And last year, in 1991, that the state of Oregon, the Attorney General's Support Enforcement, returned about $60 million to the state in collections of child support, which actually supports the taxpayers' tax load because it reduces, because there's an offset with some of the public assistance these people receive. The thing, though, is that that's the good side. The bad side is there's probably $350 million that's uncollected. And what we have to do is to be more aggressive both in the public and the private side. What I believe is that, and the state of Oregon, by the way, is a model for other states in the area of child support. As an example, that years ago when I started in the practice of law and I actually did a domestic relations practice, I remember that the issue of child support was very adversarial. We would get in and argue about how much the non-custodial parent would have to pay, what he or she could pay. And what it is today is that there is, like we have the sentencing guidelines, there's a matrix developed for child support which has on the vertical column the gross income of both parents. There's no longer a dispute of what you're going to pay once you resolve what each parent has as gross income, and you do that by W-2s and a number of other things. But then you just go out on the matrix on the horizontal scale and you find out how much you pay. So we as a state have gotten ahead of most other states in that type of an approach. Secondly, we're using a wage withholding concept which is more of a garnishment, which I do not like. I personally think that child support should be treated just like taxes and should be deducted automatically from your paycheck and transmitted to the proper person who is to obtain that child support. I think that what you really run into, and the people who I think are most difficult to deal with, are independently employed people who have no employer that we can go and get the money from. And I personally believe that if you hold a license in this state, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or whatever you are, or you have a contractor's license or something,
should be subject to your meeting your support obligation.
That's exactly.
Are you
to
going to
hold
be
that license?
Proposing legislation along the lines you've just suggested? One is allowing for an automatic deduction for child support, so you avoid the onus of this garnishment process.
That's
that
it.
A lot of people...
And I think that's what I would like to avoid, because I think when you use the garnishment concept, you basically challenge the credit record of these of the citizens, and I'm not sure that that's the right approach to take. In answer directly to your question, there's a much larger issue that's going to be involved, and I have had discussions about these issues I just talked with you about. There is going to be a bill in the legislature that is going to propose that the Attorney General's office take over all the child support, obtaining and enforcing child support orders both in the public and the private sector. That's an issue that you're going to get to deal with. I believe the Department of Human Resources believes that that's the way it should go. What you get out of it is not only uniformity in the procedure of collecting it, but you get uniformity and compliance.
Let me pause for a minute and mention to our audience that you're with us on Capitol Insight. I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix, your host. Our guest today is Ted Kulongoski, our new Attorney General. If you have any questions or comments or concerns anytime, feel free to write to me at Capitol Insight, H395, State Capitol, Salem, Oregon, 97310. We were just talking about child support and trying to change the system, and there's going to be legislation coming up during this coming session. And I'm intrigued by this. So this means like Jane Smith, who's been divorced and her husband's supposed to send her $100 a month child support, instead of having to hire an attorney because she's not on welfare or go to the district attorney necessarily for help, she could contact your office, the Department of Justice, under this legislation and just say, hey, look, my husband owes me $100 a month, he's not paying. Or are you going to automatically collect for all of them? I'm curious about how you intend to do it.
Well, first of all, that at least on the public side, and I think a lot of the judges on the private side are going to an automatic wage withholding as soon as the order is signed. It used to be voluntary. I think now they're actually implementing a wage withholding immediately. I don't think that is going to change much. I think that that's the way the judges are, it's from their perspective, it's probably not only more fair, but it's also probably much more efficient. Instead of having these people come back in and start fighting about whether they paid it or not, the judges are just now starting to do it directly. What I think that the area, obviously the district attorneys in a number of the counties would rather provide this function themselves. They would rather do this rather than the state do it. I think that there is an argument that I would like to see in the debate that in fact allowed the local district attorneys, if they meet the state standards that the legislature would establish, so we have uniformity of compliance, that in fact that they would continue to do it. We do, the Attorney General's office, by the way, in 2 counties, Lake and Lynn County, have a contract, and we do collect all of the child support on the private side. So we do in 2 counties already. But I think that overall, and I want that the listeners to understand that this isn't just an issue of whether it's a debt and has to be paid. There's a much broader issue involved, and that is that what has happened in our society is that the definition of a family has changed. A lot of families are now women with children, single head of households. And in a lot of respects, Kevin, being a divorced parent and having custody of the child is another name for poverty. We basically force these women to get on public assistance because the obligation that the father has to support them, they're not complying with. And in essence, what a lot of fathers or non-custodial parents think, that it's your and my responsibility to take care of their children.
And the answer is no, it's the responsibility of the parent.
It is, exactly. And then I think we have to look at child support as part of a much larger puzzle that we're going to try to put together, I hope, in this state, and that is the issue of work, giving people on public assistance the training and opportunity to work as the first leg. The second leg is public assistance. It is providing Medicaid for their children, and the third is child support. They're all together, and I think that we've looked at them as separate items, and I think we have to start looking at this, that there's a relationship with all three of these to allow women to become independent and to be able to take care of their families and not be on public assistance. That's why I have such a strong interest in child support.
Okay, well, picking up from there, you had mentioned earlier two others, I'll call them subsidiary central issues. One was civil rights and the other was environmental protection. We've only got about 3 minutes left, and I want to give you a chance to touch on those. Do you intend to be proposing some civil rights legislation, or have the Department of Justice more actively involved? What do you intend to see there?
We're looking inside the office right now and looking at the current statutory scheme about the civil rights laws in Oregon and to determine whether, in fact, that the current structure is actually, and what I think it is basically is an administrative process. We push everything to the Bureau of Labor. I think that the governor of this state should be allowed the flexibility that if the governor, whoever it is, believes that there is a wrong, that the state has a legitimate interest in taking the initiative and being the moving party and saying, I order the Attorney General, I'm ordering the Attorney General to conduct an investigation or to pursue prosecution, I think the governor should have that ability to do that. I'm not sure that they have right now because of the way that the statutes are constructed.
So you're working your way through the statutes
That's
on
right.
that. Then you've got environmental protection. Do you have some proposals pending, or what are you thinking about?
What I believe is that there should be environmental crimes. I believe that there should be prosecution for violation of environmental crimes. This isn't just my idea. The federal government has now mandated through the Clean Air Act that there be established criminal penalties for certain violations of the Clean Air Act. I actually think that the legislature should look much broader and see if, in fact, that there are offenses in which the state of Oregon believes that there is a strong public policy that people who create a degradation of the environment and violate the environmental laws of the state, it's more than just a civil penalty, which you can just buy your way out of, that in fact that there's a criminal penalty involved with it.
Now, are you going to be proposing legislation during this session or working on it for a couple of years?
There is a bill coming in on environmental crimes.
So we should be ready for some hot topics on it.
We are going to have a good time, and I look forward to it very, very much.
Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to at least give you a chance. In fact, we've got 1 minute left. Let us know where you're going to be in a couple of years. I asked you this before we started putting this program together today. Are you going to run for governor in a couple of years?
Absolutely not. I have no intention to. I like this job, and I appreciate the opportunity that people have given me to get back into public service, but more importantly, to be the Attorney General of this state.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have a dynamic leader in the Attorney General's office. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today on Capitol Insight. Our guest has been our new Attorney General, Ted Kulongoski, who will be leading us for the next 4 years in charge of the Department of Justice. I'm State Representative Kevin Mannix from Salem, your host. Again, if you ever have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to write to me at Capitol Insight, H395, State Capitol, Salem, Oregon 97310. Thank you for joining us. Paid for and authorized by Citizens for Mannix, 2003 State Street, Salem, Oregon 97301.